just want to say simply what I think most people around the country understand and agree. We should only wave one flag on the House floor, and I think we know which flag that is. And make no mistake, this is not a blank check like the Senate supplemental bill was. This is very different. Unlike the Senate's blank check, the House legislation has a number of very important features. It provides for greater accountability over Ukraine aid. It forces an endgame strategy for the Ukraine war. It includes a loan instrument of this foreign aid to Ukraine and the Repo Act to ensure that Russian assets pay for part of the bill. Congress takes the oversight very seriously, and we will continue to keep an eye on every dollar that we are using and investing at this time. I've said it very simply. I'll say it once again. It's an old military adage, but we would rather send bullets to the conflict overseas than our own boys, our troops.
Yes. That sound clip probably made me madder than anything else. You know why? Two things. One, they act like they're doing us a favor because for the first time they're going to start looking into the money we sent. Hey, this time we're going to look into it, guys. Like, friggin' thank you. That's one. Two, the threat at the end. Hey, if we don't do this, hate for your son to have to die. Joining me now, Kingsley Wilson, digital media manager at the Center for Renewing America. Kingsley, you can have the floor. I'm already upset.
I completely agree with you, Jesse. There's a lot to be enraged about, especially as an American taxpayer, right? You hear him talk about bullets there. And I'd like to just start off by congratulating Raytheon and Lockheed Martin. What Johnson is doing with this foreign aid bill is he is padding the wallets of the defense, military industrial complex, and all of those lobbyists that profit off of war and off of death. And it is a slap in the face to the American people, right? Because we have a southern border that is under siege. But unfortunately, feckless Republicans in Congress are more concerned with defending the border of an Eastern European country that is anti-democratic and one of the most corrupt countries in that region. It is absolutely ridiculous, and Johnson should be held accountable for it. The Biden administration, of course, is supporting him doing this because they're afraid in an election year of another Afghanistan situation, another military failure. They see that the Ukraine war is becoming unwinnable, and they're using Johnson and a lot of Republicans in Congress as their useful idiots to advance their agenda. So this is not just, $61 billion to Vladimir Zelensky, to the defense lobbyist in Washington, D.C. It is also $61 million to the Biden re-election campaign, and every American should be angry about that.
Kingsley, what do you think happened to Johnson? Look, Johnson was not bad before. I've had him on this show. I don't even have many politicians on here. A long time ago, I had him on. He was not bad, and then he just sucks all of a sudden. What happened?
I think this is what we see with a lot of weak-willed men. And unfortunately, a lot of Republicans are exactly that type of person. They go into a skiff and they're told, if you don't pass, FISA warrantless spying, if you don't give Ukraine aid, we're going to have, 9/11s every single day. And these people fall for what the deep state tells them, what the intel community tells them. We've seen that with Johnson. What we saw in President Trump was someone totally different, right? Men with courage, men that think for themselves are able to go into something like a skiff and to say, I don't believe you. Show me more evidence. Are there other opinions in your agency that contradict what you're telling me right now? Is a lot of this even made up, for example? And Johnson, unfortunately, just doesn't have that testicular fortitude to stare down the deep state and refuse to blink. He is bending to their will. And you hear him go on TV and talk about how he's, a Christian and godly man. And I do believe he is a good person. I think he's, nice, gentlemanly. But at the end of the day, it is an Christian thing to do to continue to prolong war that's unwinnable, which again, as I've said, is this Ukraine war. Ukraine has wiped out an entire generation of young men. They now have 60-year-old men fighting on some of their front lines, and we are continuing to prolong that and support it. And I think that is the most anti-godly, anti-Christian thing that you can do. So Johnson, unfortunately, has been a failure, and I hope to see Republicans hold him accountable for that. And you see, a lot of critics say now is not the time to vacate or oust a speaker. I want to vacate and oust as many as it takes to find the right one, because if we have Republicans like this, who needs Democrats?
Joining me now, my friend needs no friggin' introduction on this show, on this network, hosts the biggest radio show in the country, Clay and Buck Sexton. All right, Buck, universities are bad, evil places. I'm not sure why I'm supposed to give a crap that Columbia is burning down. That sounds wonderful to me. I've always wanted Columbia to burn down.
Yeah, I think that what you're seeing is just that there's been decades of intellectual, cultural, and moral rot at these places, and now it's on an issue that has somehow been able to unite, I think, a lot of the worst leftist factions on campus. And you have people who have a lot of influence, who ordinarily are quiet about what's going on the campuses, suddenly saying they won't give money and saying that, this is too far, this is too much. I mean, to this, I always want to say, they've been assaulting conservative speakers, including like elderly people like Charles Murray, and they've been doing this for the last 20 years, and their politics haven't changed at all. This issue, all of a sudden, some people are waking up, and I guess it's a good thing, sure, but we told you so is kind of tough not to say here. That's how I view it.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. We told you so. You just now woke up and decided Colombia was an evil communist dump that was poisonous to America. That you just found that out a couple days ago. All right, so along those lines, Buck, we already saw Claudine Gay get the heave-ho at Harvard. She's not the last, for sure. There will be other heads rolling at universities, in large part because of what you said, that donor money, that sweet, sweet donor money's going away. You don't get Robert Kraft Hall anymore at Columbia. But they're not stopping, Buck. We have all these big mega donors leaving, and yesterday the faculty joined the students at Columbia. It's not like they're slowing down. What say you?
Well, these are icebergs in terms of the endowments of these places that will take a long time to melt. You look at Harvard. What is Harvard's? Is it 40 billion or 60 billion? I don't even know how many tens of billions it is now. But a lot of these schools have just been really. They're increasingly becoming hedge funds that happen to teach classes, right? I mean, they have so much wealth amassed from the donors for particularly the last 20 years or so. So they will be able to push through this for a period of time. And I also think that, we're forgetting there are a lot of people who are making noise on this issue. This will fade. And I don't think that they will have changed their mind on a whole range of other things. And they'll probably go back to writing the checks. I hate to say it. I just think that this is a little bit of a donor tantrum that's going on that I think will be short-lived. And I think that that's why a lot of these, they realize that it's affecting their bottom line. I mean, to be sure, that's why they're sending in the police in some of these places, as you're seeing on the screen. But fundamentally, the problem, Jesse, it's not like this is a one rule or a policy that the university can change. You would have to fire most of the tenured staff at most of the elite universities in the country if you wanted this mentality, this approach, this belief system that they have, or whatever you want to call it, this kind of mania, to really disappear, or at least to be going in the other direction in a significant way. And they're not going to do that, right? This is what I mean. It's rotten so much further even than what we see on this issue of a bunch of communists who, love Hamas. And it's, of course, funny because Hamas would completely hate them and mutilate and murder them probably because they're savages. Hamas is an evil terrorist entity. But yeah, I mean, that's where this is. I don't know. The right kind of sits here and looks at this all and says, yeah, these people are. Jesse, there was a flag burning on my campus 3 weeks after 9/11. Think about it.
Of course.
Like this. So yeah, people people are like late to this party and they're like, oh my gosh, they're crazy. And look what they're saying. I'm like, they have been training kids to hate white Christian males at these schools as the oppressor and, the patriarchy and all this stuff for as long as we've been adults, probably longer than that. And now on this issue, they're just figuring out that these kids are lunatics who hate America and civilization. Welcome to the party, pal, as McClane said in Die Hard.
Welcome to the party. Actually, I have a question about domestic and how this applies domestically. Joe Biden's getting a lot of play for this very fine people on both sides line he gave yesterday. He was Joe Biden. I'm sure you've seen it.
Do you condemn the anti-Semitic protests on college campuses?
I condemn the anti-Semitic protests. That's why I've set up a program to deal with that. I also condemn those who don't understand what's going on with the Palestinians and how they're being.
Buck, so I have this theory, and it's just a theory, and I know that you're more than willing to correct me when you disagree with me on these things, but I don't think Democrats at Biden's level, forget about the street animals on campus, I don't think any of them care about any of this stuff at all. They don't really care about Israel. They don't care about Hamas. They don't care about Palestine. They don't care about Iran. They don't care about these things. They care about their domestic voting coalition. And they need all the Muslims in America to keep voting Democrat. And they need 2/3 of the Jews in America to keep voting Democrat. And their entire response to all of this has just been trying to walk that tightrope and keep both coalitions in the Democrat fold. Am I crazy?
No, I've said this all along about this issue. The whole position of the Democrats is to play both sides, have it both ways, have their cake and eat it too. They want to play this game where it's not possible, but they just are hoping that no one's going to figure out what's really happening, or that they're not going to be held to account for it. You can't say that you're opposed to the anti-Semitism stuff on I mean, these lunatics, they hate Jews, Jesse. Like, I mean, I even feel like anti-Semitism is sort of, it almost sterilizes what's going on a little bit, or makes it seem a little like it's academic. Like, oh, they're anti-Semitic. It's like they're saying completely insane, hateful, lunatic stuff. I mean, Israel just suffered the worst terror attack in the world since 9/11. And that's what led us to this moment where they're going into Gaza. Hamas, Israel has, I believe, a God-given right to defend its people and to do whatever it has to do. And the Biden administration is like, yeah, go get them. But hold on a second. Don't go get them. And you sit there, you go, well, it can't be both, right? It can't be we stand by Israel's right to defend itself, but we also want a ceasefire. And all along, there's been this, it's really more, it's interesting. I haven't talked to you about this yet, and I know we're probably running out of time, and I don't even know if I have time to tell you congratulations on getting signed by Premier. This is really important, though. I mean, Clay loved this one, so and whenever he starts referring to something I say is, well, we said, I'm like, well, then he likes it, because clearly, it's good. It's like, well, we were saying anyway. But I said initially on the show, I said you have to understand that in America, the Palestinian issue is not a religious conflict. It's a racial conflict. And the way that and you see this, right? You see there's a lot of black students on campus who feel unbelievable solidarity with the Palestinians, feel so strongly about this issue. Now, there are some Muslim students that maybe it's more of an issue of religious and historical background for them. But effectively, the radical left on campus views Israel-Palestine as a white oppressor of non-white brown people issue. And that's how they've mobilized around it for a long time now. And it doesn't make sense because there are Ethiopian Jews, and there are, I don't even have time to get into all this. And there's 1 million Arabs living in Israel. But the point that the reality that they work with is this is almost like a foreign extension of BLM. You know what I'm saying? Like this is, and it is very similar apparatus at work of how they're mobilizing and trying to shut things down, and the slogans and the shouting and all the rest of it. This is the people that were supporting BLM. They obviously didn't achieve anything. In fact, they made the whole country worse, and there's more violence, and tragically more black people in cities in America died because of the idiotic policies that BLM pushed for, because of the increase in homicide and violence, as you and I both know. But this is an opportunity to do that. White oppressor, brown oppressed, situation. I mean, this is basically what they're trying to do right now. And that's, I think, when you see it in that lens, it all makes sense, because otherwise, like, what do they demand a ceasefire? I would say, for how long? Jesse, these people don't even know. They couldn't name more than 2 towns, probably more than 1 town in Israel. Like, they know nothing. These kids are imbeciles, and they feel so strongly about this that they'll camp out on a quad in a tent and maybe have the police like pepper spray them over. And they're like, you see in the videos, they're all freaking out. I'm like, the cop said move. You don't move, you're going to get pepper sprayed. Does that all make sense, by the way, in terms of like the racial angle to the conflict?
But it does completely. It's not a religious thing. For Americans, it's a racial thing. I'm glad you and I came up with that together. By the way, before I let you go really quickly, Buck, Ilhan Omar's daughter. What are we thinking? Hot? Not hot? She's been in the news a lot. Ilhan Omar's much debated. I'm I'm dealing with the mother-daughter thing. What are your thoughts?
Well, for those at home who may not know, years ago, Jesse unknowingly got me into trouble because we had a public discussion on Twitter about how Ilhan Omar was good looking. And then some people at a place where I previously worked, not a place where I work now, got very upset at me saying, Ilhan Omar, crazy, but like kind of hot. I have to take, I will admit, I do not know. What is her daughter in the, I know I've read the headlines, but I haven't really seen the photos. But my guess is
part of the protests. She got kicked out.
She may fall somewhere on the hot crazy scale that, is going to make you question, maybe you could bring her politics around. I don't know. I think it's possible.
The Biden administration actually dug its dirty fingers into Title IX rules recently. Now, Title IX is one of those things confuses a lot of people. They don't understand even what it was, what's it turned into. I don't want to be the one to explain it to you. I'm stupid. But Kimberly Herman is not, and she joins us now. She is the executive director of the Southeastern Legal Foundation. Okay, Kim, act like I just got here from Mars. Title IX, before we get into what Biden did, what was it? What is it?
Absolutely. So back in 1972, Congress stepped in and passed what we all refer to as Title IX. It was part of amendments to our Civil Rights Act. And all Title IX does is it says that the government, so our schools, right, who receive government money, our K through 12 schools, our public colleges, that they cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. This afforded women the ability to participate in educational programs that they were previously excluded from. So we typically will hear Title IX in the context of sports, because as Title IX was implemented, it ensured that women were able to have sports teams, that they had the same number and equal opportunities when it came to athletics, educational programs, classrooms, you name it, right? Clubs, organizations, anything that deals with education. The problem now is that we have the Biden administration that came in, and on Friday, they released a new definition of sex. So for decades and decades, hundreds of years, right, we've had sex defined as a man or a woman. Now, sex includes sexual stereotypes, gender identity. Basically, anything that you want to consider sex can now be considered sex, and it eviscerates the idea that we have men and women in society that need to be protected through equality and through our Civil Rights Act. It guts everything and every protection that Title IX has ever afforded to women. And again, it literally ends the distinction between genders and sexes in this country.
Well, that doesn't sound good. Okay, so it's another massive tranny handout program. I did see the Louisiana education director told schools to ignore it, and I find this to be fascinating, Kim, because this very clearly is the way it's going to go in the future. But I guess, to put it bluntly, can he do that? Can they do that? Can states just say no? What happens if they just say no?
We were very glad when we saw Louisiana come out and say that they were telling their schools to not follow this new Title IX rule. It's not effective until August. And so what you're going to see is you're going to see a race to the courts now, right? This rule, once it's formally published in the Federal Register, is going to be challenged in courtrooms all across the country because of a few reasons. The Department of Education, quite frankly, does not have the power to unilaterally change the definition of sex for all Americans. That's something that Congress that has the power to do, right? If Congress wanted to do it, then they could have done it to begin with, or they could go back and they could do it now. This is a federal statute. The Department of Education is a federal agency, and they just do not have the power to make these major changes to statutes that have been passed by Congress. Title IX also will infringe free speech rights of parents, students, teachers, professors, all across the country. Because if you don't want to use an incorrect pronoun now, you can arguably be brought up on Title IX charges, face suspension, face expulsion, or even worse, right? So you could be a senior in college, you paid $200,000 to get this education, you refuse to call a girl a he or a boy a she, and all of a sudden you're facing expulsion from your college and changing the entire trajectory of your future. That's what we're facing in this country. And so we need more state attorney generals, we need governors, we need parents, we need teachers, all to stand up and fight against this rule.
Republicans were sent there, and the number one issue that our voters wanted them to address is the southern border and the massive influx of foreigners by the millions coming into this country, and we don't know who these people are. And they basically just surrendered on the border. They now have no leverage to do anything on the border.
I'm not going to fund both sides of a war. I'm not going to spend $100 billion we don't have unpaid for to then walk away from securing the border of the United States. And that is what the speaker did.
This is the third betrayal by Mike Johnson. He delivered a two-part omnibus, funded the Department of Justice, 91 federal indictments against President Trump, funded the FBI that raided Mar-a-Lago, gave him a brand new FBI building, funded Joe Biden's open border policies that are killing Americans every single day. Then he reauthorized FISA that spied on American citizens, spied on President Trump's campaign, and he voted against the warrant requirement, the same warrant requirement that he was for 6 months ago. And then he did this here on the House floor, foreign war package that does nothing for America. It's unbelievable.
That sounds bad, doesn't it? Let's talk to Steve about it. Joining me now, Steve Cortez. You need to subscribe to his Substack called Patria. I think I said that right. You can correct me if I'm wrong,
yes.
Steve. Anyway, you have a piece on it talking about surrender Republicans. Please, Steve, the floor is yours.
Yes, well, I'm glad you started there, by the way, with Ron DeSantis, who I think is by far the best governor in America, talking about Speaker Mike Johnson, who is unfortunately taking the dubious title, I think, of the worst Republican speaker ever. And that's not an easy mark to achieve because previously we had a child molester as a Republican speaker. But Mike Johnson right now is on his way to being even worse than Dennis Hastert. And I say that in part, by the way, because he broke what was previously known as the Hastert rule, which means you do not bring to the floor legislation which your own party, a majority of your own party, does not support. But Mike Johnson did exactly that. He passed funding for Ukraine, which a majority of his own caucus of Republicans opposed. That means that he is, if anything, a decent speaker for the Democrats. I won't say he's a good speaker for them because it doesn't rise to the level of Pelosi when it comes to being a gangster and getting things done for the Democrats, but he's at least getting things done for the Democrats. The reality is Johnson is unfortunately exhibit A right now of why so many people are frustrated in America, so many salt of the earth, America first citizens, because sometimes even when it seems like we win, we lose. Because our leaders, our feckless leaders like Mike Johnson in Washington, D.C., do not know how to exercise power, and they don't have the backbone when it comes down to when the rubber meets the road. They don't have the backbone to stand on principles that he was enunciating, by the way, as recently as weeks ago. So this isn't like he evolved on policy. This was a capitulation, and it was a Republican surrender.
Why, Steve? Why is this an all the time thing? Honestly, I told everyone on my show 2 weeks ago, I told them FISA's going to pass, the foreign aid bill is going to pass, everything's going to go through. And it's not like I was Nostradamus. I'm sure you were saying the same things. We all just knew. We all knew it's built in. The GOP leadership is going to sell out the GOP base. Why does the GOP leadership hate the GOP base?
You know, I think there's a couple of reasons, and I'll give you sort of my less cynical, but still cynical explanation. And that is that in this case specifically, when it comes to things like FISA and to things like the foreign wars bill, they are fooled, they're hoodwinked by the intelligence community. And by the way, Mike Johnson told us this. He said, literally, you know, I got my briefing from them, my secretive briefing. I can't tell you what I learned, but believe me, it's terrible. And because of that, I'm going to send almost $100 billion that we don't have, that we're going to borrow overseas. So I think they are manipulated in a sort of straightforward way by the intelligence community. But I also give you my much more cynical read. And I can't say this with any proof, but I think that all signs point this way, is that these people are also compromised. That there is information about them that perhaps the intelligence community knows, and it is able to basically put people like Mike Johnson over a barrel and say, do this or else. Now, again, I don't know that, but all the signs certainly point that way. When you have somebody like Mike Johnson, who seems to be a decent enough guy, certainly in his personal life, seems like he's a good Christian man, good father, husband, all of that, and yet for him to betray his word in this quick a manner, I mean, in this short order, to completely capitulate and acquiesce to the Democrats and effectively become the speaker for the Democrats. It tells you there's something here that's not necessarily obvious that is going on behind the scenes. Because you're right, and this is why it's so befuddling. It's so frustrating to millions of Americans out there. Now, listen, I would say, what do we do? Because we can't just complain. We can't just curse the darkness. So what do we do about this? Well, it's going to be difficult to keep the House, in part because of Mike Johnson, by the way, who, to boot, not only does he betray us on principle, he's also a terrible fundraiser. So it's going to be hard to keep the House. But if we do keep the House, it better be with Republican candidates who pledge that they are going to put a real speaker in there, somebody who believes in America first principles, somebody who's not going to prioritize the border of eastern Ukraine over the border of the southern United States. So thankfully, we do at least have an opportunity to try to rectify this as citizens into November.
Steve, can I ask you something? And you can just give it to me between the eyes. It's fine. I know we're on camera, but you say we might not be able to keep the House.
Yeah.
Why should I care? And allow me to explain. Why should I care?
Yeah.
So the GOP gives me endless foreign money. The GOP just got done trying for a massive amnesty bill that guaranteed amnesty for everybody. The GOP doesn't even bother fighting culture wars anymore. Hey, we love abortion. Now we don't want to lose elections. Gay marriage for everyone. So the GOP spends more money, frankly, as much or more than Democrats do. They do every single time. I'm going down the list of issue after issue after issue after issue. And I understand that Joe Biden's bad and the Democrats are evil, and I get all that. But why should I sit and lose 1 minute of sleep that the GOP might lose the House of Representatives in November? And I really want you to tell me, Steve, give it to me.
Yeah.
Why should I give a crap?
I hear what you're saying, and generally I would agree with you with this major caveat. And this, I think, is a compelling reason that I hope will motivate the audience out there why we do need a Republican House. Because if Hakeem Jeffries is the Speaker of the House and Donald Trump is the President of the United States, and I believe both those things are probably going to happen given current trajectories, if that happens, they are going to impeach Donald Trump in a nanosecond, particularly if Donald Trump is convicted in New York, which I think he will be in this circus kangaroo court sham trial that's going on in New York City. If he is convicted, they will have at least a pretense of a reason, a patent that they can use to engage immediately in impeachment proceedings. And I don't want Donald Trump to take office for his second term, which I think can be really, really effective, and I think in many ways better than his first term was. But if he is immediately thrown into impeachment, which I think he would be if the Democrats control the House, then it will be incredibly difficult for him to get things done. It would be almost like the Russia hoax was during the first administration. So that would be my most compelling argument. I agreed with you. I can't come up with many other ones, but I think that's a really important reason why we should keep the House and absolutely, though, elect a new speaker if we do keep the House, not feckless Mike Johnson.
That was Harvard. USC announced today they're not even having a graduation speech. I think this is all fantastic. I wonder if Erin disagrees with me, though. Joining me now, Erin Wexler, political commentator. You can find her. She's outstanding on Instagram, non-libtake. All right, Erin, obviously, it's not good to have a bunch of dirty communist scum destroying American universities, kill all the Jews and all that stuff. That's obviously not ideal. But the American university system is poison. A bunch of Americans are now realizing it's poison, and I think in the end that's a good thing.
Yeah, Jesse, first, thanks for having me. And I definitely agree with you. This is one of my favorite subjects right now. As an Ivy League graduate, I hope you and your audience will not hold that against me. But when I actually graduated from the University of Pennsylvania. When I was there, we actually colloquially referred to it as the Juniversity of Pennsylvania. And back then we were doing things like taking finance exams and writing history papers. And even back then, which was almost a decade ago, it was very evident that the university was turning into what is essentially a woke madrasa. Even I could not have predicted things would be this bad. The administration, the students, the faculty, they are so far to the left. They are churning out Marxists who are basically taking classes in roadside bomb making and underwater hijab weaving. So, at this point, I agree with you. I've seen your tweets online, and I love to see this. This is the educational enema that these institutions need. There's been a lot of bullshit building up for a long time, and it is time to flush it out. So, we have some of these soft conservatives who are saying, oh, this is so terrible to see. It's, if people like us who love watching this, like I love watching this. And for those of us who do, they would argue that, we're celebrating the fall of great American institutions. These institutions are not American anymore. They were infiltrated a long time ago. The American flag was lowered. And some of these clips, you'll see the students actually lowering the American flag, raising terrorist flags over the schoolyard. So this is, I think, absolutely necessary. And I'm just glad that everyone gets to see it now.
Yeah, me too. I will know we will have succeeded if I can go to one neighborhood party in my area and not have one of my neighbors bragging that Aiden, Jaden, and Braden got into Yale. Oh, these universities, their reputation needs to go the way the university has gotten. I am curious though. You were at some fancy school like UPenn, very similar to the community college I went to. Did you feel this stuff coming when you were there? Meaning. Did it feel like it was getting darker? They've always been Democrat. They've always been, crappy libs. But did you feel something sinister, or is this just really recent?
Yeah, well, first, and credit to you, Jesse, I do think that now your college ranking is definitely inversely correlated to your intelligence level. So you're one-upping me on that. Way to brag about your degree. But yeah, no, it was really clear when I was an undergrad that things were heading in the wrong direction. And this is what the left is really effective at, right? They're really good at the slow boil of the frog. And I think a huge problem we've had on the right is letting them get away with it. For us, it's always been live and let live, and it's not so bad, and they just slowly turn the temperature up on us little by little. So when I was there, it was seemingly small things, but I at the time could identify it, and I was actually asked to be the president of College Republicans when I was there. So just to give you a sense, I've always been very, very conservative and very vocal when I was on campus. But they were doing things like, getting rid of Greek life and getting fraternities in trouble because the administration saw that as, the patriarchy and the rich white male, even though like many liberal policies, it wound up backfiring because with the fraternities on campus, you could have parties that everyone could attend that were, free for people. And in getting them off campus, it actually just made certain social activities even more exclusive and even more expensive. So we saw whether it was in our social life, the teachers. I was both in Wharton undergrad and the liberal arts school, so I got a taste of both. And even in Wharton, which I went to because I saw it as the final beacon of capitalism in this country, in the Ivy League, and that's why I wanted to go to Penn. Even there, we had professors who were just trying to shove liberal, almost socialist agendas down our throats all the time. And as these professors retired, the old school, the old guard, they were white men, and they were always replaced with a DEI hire without fail. And then don't even get me started about the liberal arts school because, that was, it was like jihadi training camp over there. But even Wharton was infiltrated back then, and it only got progressively worse. And I think we all know that post-COVID, the left decided that they had free reign to do whatever they want, and that was especially true on college campuses.
Gosh, even Wharton. I don't know why I'm shocked to hear that. Of course, it would be Wharton too, but Wharton. Now, everyone knows about Wharton, even dummies like me who could never get in. Everyone knows about Wharton. Did you get the sense that some of your professors or administrators, that they knew this stuff was bad, and maybe they were afraid, maybe pushing back, but only pushing back a little, don't want to lose that tenure? I'm trying to figure out, basically, Aaron, at these high-level schools, do we have any friends left?
I know we do have friends left. When I was an undergrad, that we're talking 2011 to 2015, I could always sniff out my conservative professors because they were the only ones not shoving an agenda down your throat, right? So that's how I was able to identify them. I do recall also the day after Barack Obama was elected president in 2012, crying as I handed a finance midterm in, saying to my professor, "What's the point?" And he said, "We will get through this." But besides that one professor, I did find that most of them truly believe this. They actually are Marxists in these institutions. And I mean, it does make sense now. The DEI hiring practices are so rampant. It is almost impossible to get hired in any of these places unless you totally subscribe to these. They could sniff you out. And I think conservatives just stay quiet. You have to subscribe to these ideas. So no, I think we have few friends left, but generally these are people who've never lived in the real world, never held a real job, and they have their fantastical ideas, and they just sit in these institutions getting paid some of them actually a lot of money. The DEI admins get paid a lot more than professors, so that's turned out to be a great gig. I just don't really have hope in these institutions. I don't think it's worth any penny sending your kid to these schools. Even if you have a full ride at this point, I don't know what you gain from going to places where instead of right now, this time when I was a student, I'd be sweating in the library, so nervous about finals. I don't know how these kids feel comfortable sitting in the middle of college campus, just protesting something that has nothing to do with their exams. So I think that you'll be better served going elsewhere or not going to school and getting a skill set and going into the real world. So that is my message to anyone here with a teenager thinking of going to an Ivy League school. I certainly would not let my kid go to an Ivy League school.